Hi everyone, I'm Alon Lits. I'm the founder of October Health. Really excited today to have Kel Hartman with me. She's the Chief People Officer at Navro in the UK, a global fintech player. And Kel is famous in the HR world, having achieved a lot both and being recognized globally as a leading HR professional and a champion of employee well-being. So Kel, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think I always love to start giving people a bit of context. You know, you're at Navro today.
Yes.
But you had a long and successful career prior to this. So do you mind giving us a bit of insight?
Yeah, sure. So prior to Navro, so I've been in Navro just over a year now, and I love it. It's an international fintech, as you said, payments company. So really enabling companies to access their global accounts locally. And before that, I did a short stint at Chippercash, so an African fintech company. But prior to that, I was 4 years at Flywire. So Flywire, another fintech company, also a payments company, and Mike Massara is actually one of the angel investors at Navro. And prior to that, I did work a lot in the startup world. So based back in Australia, worked at Seek.com, and then went into Canby in London. And prior to that, I actually worked in the banks. I had an amazing stint in a charity for 3 years. I was a dream catcher maker, so I actually helped enable young adolescents to live their dreams through corporate Australia.
Oh, wow,
so yeah,
amazing.
And so yeah, that was 3 years paid by the bank. So probably it was an incredible experience because I also led an executive trip with young adolescents to build leadership, sustainability, healthcare centres in Mali in West Africa. And it was there that one of the executives from Deutsche Bank said, "You're coming to work for me in London. You're going to come into Deutsche Bank." And I was like, "I'm not going to do that." And I lasted 5 years in Deutsche Bank and 15 years in London. So I've been there for quite a while.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing career thus far.
Yeah.
And I think maybe a great place to start is when
Sure.
you were with Flywire, you were recognized as an international HR leader, and you did some amazing work when it came to mental well-being in the workplace. So do you mind sharing some insights around some of the initiatives that you rolled out and how you used well-being not only as a critical component to support staff,
Sure.
but to ensure that they could thrive and ultimately help the company perform at the high level that they did?
Yeah. So I was at Flywire when the pandemic hit, and I think I'm someone that thrives under pressure, under like constant change. Like we didn't know what was happening, and we had offices and people at Flywire from all around the world, like from Valencia, Spain, we also had Israel, China, Japan. So the pandemic had hit them first, yeah. So that's when it all, even in Australia, we had Romania, we had all over the States, the UK. So, you know, we were across the sector. And then we also had people in Africa, and also at the time South America and Central America. So it was huge because things were changing at a rapid rate. And at the time I'd also gone into, and I think people were really struggling with this change of life. And we not only had to have people working, because we had offices, and then we were, fully in office,
Okay.
Except for some of the salespeople that worked remote, right? And that was predominantly in Australia at the time, and also across the States, but predominantly we were in office, and everyone loved the office culture. Even me, I was 24/7 in the office. If I did a red-eye flight, I'd be back. I think at Flywire, it was always about the people, and I think Mike Massaro, the CEO of Flywire, was really recognised that you don't have a company without its people. So really partnered with him with anything related to the people, which is everything. I think at the time with the pandemic hitting, people were then struggling. Like, how do I balance my life with homeschooling my children? Those that were living alone were separated. A lot of people, like myself, were living abroad. So without hugs. I'm a very tactile person. I need interaction with people. I even struggled mentally, like, where am I going to live? Do I stay in Boston with the executive team? Because actually there was a last flight. I was in Boston at the time when they were closing all the borders. And so I actually remember ringing the chairman and saying, where should I go? Should I go back to Australia? Should I stay in? And I actually went back to London and actually changed my whole lifestyle there, because I was traveling every 10 days before then. And I did one-on-ones with people all day long, and really understood.
How big was the organisation at that point?
Probably about 400. So a lot. Like, I'd spend a lot of my time walking meetings. I know we weren't allowed to, we had 2 hours out a day, but I could stay home. Like, I had to be out. We started doing online exercise classes. So we'd do like a boxing or a HIIT class or a yoga. We had push-up competitions. And we had people, like, it was amazing. We had people like from Israel and Romania and China and America, and then we'd have 2 lots across the, different time zones. And we had to start connecting in different ways.
So you created a community.
We created a really big community, not just like Slack groups, like cooking classes. And it wasn't all about, like, we did cocktail making and that, but it wasn't just about drinking. And then we did a lot about, and we had already started, like, we'd already created a culture, but then I started speaking to people, and there were issues of maybe suicide, like depression, anxiety, domestic violence. And although I trained in psychology, that wasn't my role. And so I remember I said, can we get some psychologists in to help? And we'd already had psychologists come and talk to us about anxiety and depression. And I think the really important thing is that you need vulnerability to connect with people. We're human too. So I would talk about, I had depression. I couldn't stop crying. I don't know what's happening in my life, because I was traveling every 10 days. And for me to stay put in one country for more than 10 days was a struggle for me. And then not knowing when you're going to see your family and preparing for that, like, 2-week quarantine, which I never did. And
it was was locked down for 2 weeks. That just carried on, right?
Exactly. So then we started getting, and what I wanted to do, because I didn't think traditional EAP was not working. So we had EAP. And then I started getting them psychologists that I personally vetted. And then the uptake was huge, and people just couldn't believe that we'd do that. But it took for someone like me to have a conversation and would say, Alon, like, you seem like you need real help. And I want to help you, but I really believe that you should see a psychologist that I've met and I've seen myself. So then that started this whole...
So role modeling.
Yeah, role modeling and showing humanity and understanding people, vulnerability. So I then had this, like, it was like a spreadsheet at the time of people and the psychologists. And then there was more need for it. And so then we had psychologists that, psychologists that speak Japanese, Chinese. And I work with a couple of key psychologists. They're incredible, like, that specialize in certain things, whether it's eating disorders, domestic violence, sexuality, whatever it was. So they were listed on our internal intranet page, and people could book times with these people. And then, like, we're in Valencia, and so we'd bring in the psychologists that speak Spanish, so they could meet them and introduce them, and then could make their own. And we offered it up for their families, children. Then we started to have parenting classes. So parenting psychologists, we had a whole parenting. And that was incredible, because you also have to think that parenting is different at different levels. You have children with special needs, you have adolescents, you have babies, you have toddlers, you have people that are pregnant, you have fertility issues. So we had psychologists she was incredible, that just worked with these people.
Oh, wow.
And then we had, as you talked about today in October, mental health, like, we had groups of people, because you have to feel like you're not alone. And so you brought all these cohorts together. And then I even created one for single people living alone, and we had a date night.
And I think that's an overlooked segment, right? Like, I mean, it was difficult being single during COVID, right?
Crazy.
Like, all of a sudden you were locked in your apartment by yourself, like, with no interaction. That's really tough.
Yeah, couldn't even go on the dating apps because you couldn't meet people outside. So that was a big struggle, and people couldn't believe that they're like, Kelly, this is the first time we've even been looked at. Usually it's like, oh, like everyone else has got families, so we'll give the work to you or something like that. So we started, so I think it goes back to my whole concept is there's no one size fits all. Everyone is going through their own struggles at the time, and building the communities is one, giving them psychological support if they need it is two, but some of them had psychological support for children, for their families, and then their own. And it was like the most incredible thing for them. People were saying that this helped them. So you cannot ever separate what's going through you mentally to what's going on at work. Like you can say, yeah, I'm just going to focus on work, but if something's at the back of your mind, then that's going to happen. And then I remember even getting a chef for someone, like cooking because someone's family died. Like, so going that extra way, like someone had a bike accident, I remember, and we flew his mum to meet him in America, like just in a different state. And so we went out of our way, constant check-ins, constant gifts, and then just talking about our struggles was a big one. You know, we had anxiety workshops, we had depression, we had a breath workshop. So a lot of programs for people during that pandemic. So it was really tailor-made and quite incredible when I think about what we did. But I still believe that premise, even through Navro, having just one most loved workplace, we don't have the budget. We're Series A, we weren't a Series D. But you can do things still to take care of your people. You can still have communities to talk about stuff and to support each other. And I do believe that mental health, if you've got a healthy environment, you are going to have greater performance.
So we're actually here at the HR Tech Fest, and you gave an awesome presentation yesterday. And I want to talk to some of the initiatives that you've rolled out at Navro. But before we do that, I think you shared some stats just around both the individual toll that poor well-being can have, but at the same time, the importance, if you get that right, the positive impact that can have at an organization. You also spoke about, stress and healthy and unhealthy stress. So do you mind sharing a bit about that? Because I think that context is important before we speak to some of the positive steps and initiatives that you've rolled out.
So I think having a psychological safe environment to have these conversations, to do these stuff. Yeah, there's stats from Harvard Business Review, Gallup. Like I think there's an increase in 50% productivity
which is massive.
Because if you're and the intersection of who you are as a woman, a black person, you're neurodiverse, I've got ADHD, like what is the impact of having an inclusive environment? And I know that to your mental health and your performance. Like when I'm accepted and embraced for who I am, and then I think of the hundreds and even thousands of people in an organization, if we embrace them for who they are and make sure that we're leveraging their strengths and not trying to change them, you're going to get a better performance in your work and less turnover, less stress.
We're at the HR Tech Fest here in Johannesburg, and you spoke about that having employees in the right environment means that employees can thrive.
Yeah.
Right? And you shared some interesting stats. Do you mind sharing some of those stats with our audience?
Yeah, of course. So I think, from the Gallup and Harvard Business Review, I think some of the stats were 50% more productivity when people are psychological safe, and it makes sense because when there's more productivity, you are speaking your mind, you're challenging ideas, you're giving thoughts. But if you don't feel psychological safety, you're not going to speak up. You're not going to challenge. And so you're not going to get diversity of thought, creative ideas and things like that. And I think with Navro, we've got incredible leaders with and founders in Aaron and Eddie that they want us to challenge. Their first thing they ever said to me is, we can't wait for you to tell us what we're doing wrong and help us get to the next level. So they said, we want you to challenge us. And not many leaders are like that. And I think also with psychological safety, there's 76% less stress, 27% less attrition, and it all makes sense. I've seen it happen time and time again. So I think all this AI and tech is incredible. It helps you get to the next level, but you still need human connection. You still need the behaviors that underpin everything. And that's really important to us. We've articulated in our organisation with our employees what are the behaviours we expect. And one of our values is we want people to thrive. So if we want people to thrive, we have to be honest, we have to be transparent. We've got to give them that freedom to do that. But there's one more aspect of great performance and the creativity and incredible, thrive is that there's the accountability. So we can have a psychological safe environment and not hold anyone accountable. And then, that's just apathy, really. Yeah. So I think you need the accountability as well. And we hold people accountable at Navro. And it's our people that said, we want goals, we want to be held accountable, and we want to stretch people to new levels. So I think that's where you thrive.
So I love that point, because I think often, if people think about well-being, they often think that let people get away with everything, and that's the opposite of what you're doing. And I love the way you've articulated that accountability drives high performance, right? And you can create the safe environment without compromising on accountability.
For sure. And we need people to perform, and if not, we have to have a conversation. But those conversations, and I've always said, can be had in a really honest, empathetic, supportive way. It's, and I think that's the aspect. We have to make hard decisions, and we do as an organisation, but you can still do it in a really kind and empathetic way. But we do hold people accountable, and we want them to hold us accountable too. So if I'm not doing something right, I want someone to be able to challenge me, my team or anyone in the organisation, irrespective of what level they are.
Yeah, so I love that culture where it's open, you can have that honest dialogue with each other, you can, obviously recognise great behaviours, but you can call out the wrong behaviours.
Sure.
You spoke a lot about some of these initiatives that you've implemented. I think it's amazing, as you mentioned, Navro is a Series A company, so still really early in your journey, but you've been recognized as one of the top places to work. So what do you think some of the initiatives are that you've rolled out in the organization that have, allowed you to be recognized in such a short space of time?
Yeah. So I think one is our leadership. You have to have, I've worked in organizations where I've tried to influence, and you can to a certain point, but when you've got the support of your leaders, that's the most important thing. And I'm not afraid to say anything to Eddie and Aaron and them back to me. So I think that is huge. And we've got a really great executive team that is collaborative. There's no backstabbing or bullshit or politics. It's just, let's just work with each other. And I think that's what people say. So I think then the initiatives come. So I think one of our big ones this year was the Women of Navro. A lot of women came and opened up as a senior woman, and really, again, they wanted a community. And it was really hard to articulate what it was and the impact, but it was, I'm not alone. I had these thoughts. These thoughts are sometimes in my head sometimes, and it's nothing to do with stuff. It's just past experiences or baggage and things like that. And I know because I used to do that. And I think a clear example of that was one woman, and she allows me to share this story because I did on LinkedIn and I asked if I could share it. But she was like, Kelly, sometimes I wake up and think, do I have a job? And she said this in the group. And I said to her, do you understand that Aaron came to me last week and said, have you met this woman? She's incredible. And her face just shone, but it just shows you that a lot of the stuff is in our head. So how do we support each other? And what are some of the things like imposter syndrome, poor confidence? But what was magical is we brought the executive team in, Aaron and the others, and we gave feedback about what we want. And it wasn't like we wanted to be treated differently. And I didn't speak. It wasn't for me. It was for the women to lead this. So that was a really incredible initiative. Yeah, you give them the platform and they feel safe. And the executive responded so well to it too. So I think there's one thing. I think swapping public holidays, holiday swapping is huge, right? So you might have a public holiday and it might be something that means nothing to you, but you may have a religious holiday, another holiday that does. So again, you get to choose where your public holidays are.
So, that ultimately comes down to a high trust environment.
Yeah.
initiatives like Women of Navro drive that high trust environment? What are things that organizations can do to create that high level of trust? And I think you've also touched on, it seems like you've got a really tight-knit exec team, and that filters down. But how do you build that trust between the employee group and leadership? How do you build that trust between HR and the broader employee group, right? Where they don't feel like, listen, I love Kel, but she's there for Navro and not for us as employees.
I think you got, like, the first thing I did, and I was very lucky, I'm in a small organization, but I did the same at Flywire. And at Chipper Cash, actually, everywhere I've been, I go out and meet everyone and I listen and I follow up. And if they ask for stuff.
So I was like, that follow-up point is so important, right?
Oh, huge, because a lot of people, it just goes into a black hole. And there's some difficult conversations that they're still waiting on answers for. So I will follow up straight away and hold myself accountable. Like, no, we can't do this, and give them context and the reason why. Yeah. And I think, so then they trust, because they're like, oh my God, she's going to tell us the truth.
And I think that's, again, it's just so important. And I want to stress that point that, like, just because you're listening doesn't mean you need to agree with everything, right?
No.
But it does mean that if an issue is raised or a recommendation is made, it doesn't mean that you just ignore it because you can't say yes to it. It's important that, as you said, you give feedback. Listen, we have listened to you, and for X, Y, and Z reason, we can't do it.
Yeah.
And that often people don't have that context, right? And just providing that context, providing feedback for issues is so important in building that trust.
Yeah. And so I did a lot of walking meetings, like, you know, in Poland, in Portugal, in Ireland, in London. And if I couldn't, because they were remote or we couldn't make it, then I'd do remote. And we've had round tables with the executives. So, and the executives and me, like, we're not seen as, we're so approachable, like all of us. Like, we're in the office and we're always, you know, doing stuff together. Like, sometimes I'll even go to a gym class with a group of people. We did fun scavenger hunts. But I think one of the things that was my top priority was leadership training, right? That came out as something, actually, we put people in leadership roles. Let's assess whether they really want it, giving them the choice, making sure that they're okay for saying, no, I don't want to do this, but then running a leadership program. And so there was a lot of open dialogue, and the leadership programs that we run, like, people couldn't believe it. They're like, this is nothing like we've done before, because it was conversations, it was experiential. They worked together, they could ask anything they wanted. So again, and we co-create programs. So nothing I do is because it's a HR initiative. It's because, and so we had the engineering leaders help coordinate and tell us what they wanted, and we go out to people and say, what do you want, right?
Yeah, so I love that. And I think I love just generally everything that you talk about is practical.
Yeah.
And you spoke to your leadership training, and I know something you mentioned to me is role playing.
Yeah.
Right, and the importance of role playing. So can you share a bit around how you use role playing to train leaders? So it's not just this theoretical understanding, it's actually a practical understanding that individuals develop.
Yeah. So first of all, I observe people. So if I observed a person that I can see is more meek and not as assertive, and I look at their behavioural preference profiles, I may challenge them and get you know, I did a role play, I never forget, and people thought it was real. So I did acting for fun. So I would be on my computer and I'm like, yeah, and they'd be trying to have a conversation. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, like, Aaron's there. And they're like, oh, do you have to do work? And it was a role play, but they thought it was real. And I would just ignore them and be on my phone and they wouldn't know what to say. And so we'd have to
so
stop
you're
and coach.
Challenging them.
I challenge them to them. And then those people that are more, you know, assertive and more tactical and fast-paced and not as empathetic as some other people, I would probably cry for them and do something really sensitive. And sometimes we had people that just were like, we can't do this. And I'm like, yeah, you can. And so, because you may have a person. And then I would get the room to choose scenarios that they're experiencing. And it could be someone drunk at a party, because that happens. You're in a social and someone's going off on a rant. What are you going to do to actually stop that? And so everyone loved the role plays, and we did them in front of each other. So we were all learning, and we all learned to give feedback. So I think the role plays was like something that they loved, but it was practical. It wasn't a role play that was not relevant to the workforce.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think often what you learn as a leader in these programs is theoretical, and it's
Yeah.
so difficult to take that theory and apply it to the day-to-day, like be more assertive.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
How do you
Right?
do
What
it?
better way than a role play? And it's, again, such an easy thing that organizations can implement.
Yeah, it's so easy. And all the exercises, and then, you know, we have neurodiverse. I'm neurodiverse. I can't sit still for so long, and neither can some people in the room. And people, but the way I opened it, I do photography, so I have photos in the room, and I get them. I might ask a question, like, tell me what is one quality, which is one card that reflects the quality you want to work on. And so they use the cards to tell the story. And again, people are identifying, people are sharing, people are vulnerable. And no one's, like, people are so open that they said, actually, I'm really not good at communicating with people, or I don't know how to connect. Can you help me? And then we give them coaching and mentoring extra. And then there's further cohorts. So we're constantly evolving the program and reviewing it. But one day, my whole agenda may be thrown out the window because we're sitting on one topic that I think is important to explore, because that's what the room wants to explore. So you can't be tied to a topic. Like, you can't be tied to an agenda. And I think so many traditional leadership, or any training, we do training on, you know, conflict or self-leadership, or, you know, a hiring, you know, but you can't be, and then there's like different cultural differences and languages, and you've got to take everything into consideration. And so you have to just be open, like open in your learning, open to people, open to everything, and help support each other.
No, I think a key theme, like constantly from you, is this one size fits all.
Yeah.
Just doesn't work, right? And
No.
adapting to the environment, adapting to employees' need in a way that you're not stuck in a preconceived agenda, what people need or what people want.
Yeah.
And I mean, you get that by listening to employees, and I think that's so powerful and so important.
Yeah.
Maybe as we kind of reach the close,
Sure.
I think what was, you know, is really valuable is, you know, how do you give employees this opportunity to connect from a community perspective? Because I think often organizations, you know, focus on a particular cohort or run something that, you know, only appeals to some people. So how do you create opportunities for staff to engage in a way that's more inclusive, right? So it's not the run of the mill, let's have a party with alcohol. That's not there for, you know, what everyone enjoys. So
Sure.
I know you've done some exciting things from that perspective. So I'd love for you to share a bit more.
So again, it's listening to them, like whether I do the one-on-ones, and then we may do, like even with our wellbeing, like we ask them, would you use a wellbeing, like do you want a wellbeing, do you need psychologists, what do you want? Like rather than, you know, same as benefits, same as like, hey, would you like to do a scavenger hunt? We've got all our engineering and product team coming from all over the world, do you want to do a scavenger hunt? And I was thinking, oh God, and I showed Aaron, and he's like, well, I remember him saying that's funky, and I'm like, yeah, maybe it won't work, because we had themes, right? So we had Sherlock Holmes, or we had Renato, and, you know, like different things, Chopin in Poland. And I created these quirky things that people would get to, and they loved it. Like, you know, they're running around London trying to do different activities, but you've got to ask them and then get them to co-create. So one of the things was recognition. So at our all hands, like not all hands, that we had an offsite in Spain last year, and we said we need something more, a recognition program. We have a gratitude channel, but something beyond your performance and maybe linked to our behaviours. And so we had a cohort of people. I said, who wants to volunteer? And I actually stood out of it. I'm not running it. It's actually led by the employees. They run the recognition program. So
wow,
yeah,
okay.
And they tell us what training they want. What other training do you want? They told us they want OKRs and goals and more structured performance cycle. So we've got a structured performance cycle now.
Yeah.
Again.
So clearly it's a highly engaged workforce there, right? So,
yeah.
And I mean, that's enabled by that safe environment. So, and that just leads, going back to your earlier point, to that productive environment. Because if, you know, individuals are kind of willing to go above and beyond in their day-to-day and take on these initiatives, clearly they care about the workplace.
Oh, they totally do. And like our execs, Aaron, Eddie, they have one-on-ones with employees, check-ins on them. If they're in the office, let's go for a coffee. It's incredible. Like, you know, you don't see that at every level. So I feel very lucky, because I feel like I'm in a complete psychological safe space. Like, I feel like I can be myself, I can have a meltdown, I can tell them I'm going through menopause, and hey, I might not be, you know, not sleeping well, and they're cool with it, you know, and I never feel embarrassed telling them anything, you know. It's really, yeah, it's a place I want to be and I love, and yeah.
I think what's maybe, as we kind of reach the close, I think what's important and what's shone through is like one, authenticity, but also this ability for people to be so different, right?
Yeah.
And authentic to who they are, but at the same time having alignment as an organization.
Sure.
So you can have different personalities, different backgrounds, different preferences, different working styles, differences across the board, right? Different individuals, but you have commonality and you have common culture and common behaviors.
Yeah.
So that's also, I think, an important piece to get
Sure.
right? Because I think what often happens is that you don't create a diverse environment that's aligned, right?
Yeah.
So, but you've done that. And like, how do you get that balance right? How do you create or encourage diversity and inclusivity and alignment in a way that's helping the organization thrive?
So I think one of it was we all worked on our behaviours together, and they articulated what the behaviours were. We didn't have that. We had values, but what did that mean? What does that look like? And then embedding them in everything we do, from our recruitment, our promotion, our recognition program, our performance. So it's not just how you perform, it's how you perform. And actually taking action. If there's toxicity, if there's bad behaviours, we have conversations, and if you're not behaving, it's out. And I don't think organisations always do that. They'll keep a top performer even if they're behaving badly, And I think Navro take a stand on that, and I think, companies need to do that. So we hold it, and so I don't believe Navro is for everyone. I know it's not. Like, it is fast paced, it's dynamic, it's sometimes unstructured. We're building structure in, but if you don't want to work in that pace, then this is not for you. I tell people it's not a 9-to-5 job. It does not mean you're working crazy hours every night, but if a client needs you or I need to do something, then I'm going to work extended, right? But, my Aaron puts boundaries on me. I might text him on a Saturday with an idea, and he's like, okay, let's do this on a Monday, unless it's really, really urgent, So I think that's really important. Like, there's a flexibility. I like working late at night. That is my thing. I like coming home when my boyfriend isn't around, and I will work late and source for people and things like that. But that's not for everyone, right? So again, goes back to the one size fits all. Like, we have to operate in the way that we thrive, and where our creativity and things like that come through.
And I think it also goes back to your point around accountability, right? And also the point, which I think is such a critical one, is being very clear around expectation.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're clear around expectation, you can hold people accountable.
Of course.
I think the worst thing within organizations is if it's not clear what success or failure looks like. How do you measure that? And it sounds like you've done an incredible job in being transparent around what that definition of success is. And again, just to borrow from what you've said, the importance of the what people achieve, but how they achieve it as well. Is that in line with the behaviors of the organization?
So it goes back to the psychological safety and the accountability. You're clear on what you need to achieve. If you're not achieving them in the right behaviors, then this is not the place for you. And that's okay. We have a conversation around that. But that is a really important thing.
Yeah. So maybe just as we close, I think, great to talk about all these things, but the results and the success is there, right?
Yeah.
So with Navro, it's being recognized as the top workplace, right? But like, this means that, the organization can thrive. So it's not only, as we kind of shared in a theoretical Harvard Business Review sense, but it's leading to the organization performing better. And that is the importance of creating the safe environment. So Kel, thanks so much. I think so much practical insights into what you can do to create a psychologically safe environment for your employees, and importantly, how that then translates to, individuals being able to perform at the highest levels, but also creating world-class organizations. So Kel, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Great chatting.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.